Here we are. What's left? From San Francisco, California. We are here, Andy and Eduardo, on our political discussion, our weekly political discussion, challenging the political mainstream left. The topic of today, Andy, please.
Yes, is censorship, or what we'll say is what has happened with InfoWars in the last week or last few days, which will be a week. No, it'll be a week by the time we put this episode up. Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, basically, and Facebook banning InfoWars. In addition, there's been the banning of activists posting things on Facebook, activists on the left and activists on the right. And I think also this is related to WikiLeaks, but I think the big issue, the big debate there is on the left, I think, is what to say about InfoWars being banned by these companies.
Good. And I just want to say I'm going to try to speak today, but I might speak minimally, and we'll get to that because I'm not doing too well.
Yeah, and we were planning on doing a whole episode on Nicaragua, actually.
Yeah.
And this is not because this is such big news. We're not switching the topic as a big news. We're switching the topic because we've got to redo the interview. We had some sound problems. So next week, we're definitely going to, well, I believe we're going to get the activists from Nicaragua to speak. They did a great job, and we lost it all.
Oh, we had two great activists on the interview.
Yeah.
All right. So go ahead. So then what did you want to start with? And
okay.
Then from there, I'll take it from there.
Okay. So first off, I think, let me just say that I oppose what's happened with InfoWars. InfoWars is a right-wing, it's been around for 20 years or so. It's a right-wing, in this case, this year, it's a pro-Trump website, but it does talk about various conspiracies, some outlandish, like the fact that the stuff around Sandy Hook, some I agree with, 9/11 being an inside job, and I think there is some evidence about chemtrails and things like that. Being, the government doing stuff to experiment with the
climate.
They did that actually in Vietnam. But a lot of people are saying, well, it's good, that they're out because they're anti-immigrant, which they are, and they foment hate, and so it's good that Facebook and them have done that. I don't agree with that. I think that what's happened is the very same excuse which is being used around Russian meddling, and some elements of Facebook is saying some of the hate speech and things like this. All this is doing is strengthening both the institutions of the state and the institutions of corporate America, of the capitalist corporate institutions, to basically limit the speech of any side, whether it be right wing or left wing. And I think anybody who's interested in actually getting out an alternative narrative, which I think what's left is interested in that, and I think there are people on the right who are interested in that, should find what Facebook and Spotify and iTunes has done as very, very scary, because this doesn't actually, I believe InfoWars are going to be fine, but what people who are justifying this, particularly people on the left, and already that's happened, Facebook has used the very same Russia meddling excuse to not just go after Alex Jones and InfoWars, but take down a bunch of left-wing websites that were trying to organize on the basis of these things where they accuse them of being Russian bots or Russian sites that they can take down. I'll say more about how I think this whole Russia meddling thing, this is just a continuation of the Russia meddling, the fake news really about Russia getting involved in our 2016 elections and actually changing it. To actually create real meddling in our elections by essentially the corporate media essentially deciding who gets to say what around not just this upcoming elections, but around political activism in this country. So we should oppose this, full stop. And I'll say more later about what I think is really behind this, because I do think it's related to the 2016 election, but it has nothing to do with Russia.
Well, I think we can say that this is a related video to a previous video that we had also had on Democracy Now!, the media, and would you say that this is like censorship from of the state? possibly
like it isn't actually government, it's corporate, but it's the forces of the state. Corporate America and our state, I do believe, are acting together to limit free speech.
All right. I personally will just admit that I don't really care for InfoWars, and I really do not feel like I'm missing out. But on the larger scale, as far as what it means, what's the significance of it, for as a society to be selecting who gets to have a voice in our society and who does not, I have some questions, and I have some conflicting views, because sites, mediums like InfoWars call into question, at what point do we also, as a society, allow, even in an idealistic socialist society, at what point do we call out hate? Like, we also, it's not, I don't know if I can call it censorship, but we have to, as a collective, also decide, when do we put a limit to hate speech, to anything that perpetuates and incites sort of hate the way that InfoWars does, and any media outlets. And I'm saying that for both, like left and right. I'm not just saying specifically the right, but InfoWars does have a lot on their site, a lot of conspiracy theories. Living in an age of fake news, as so-called and coined by Trump, I think there is this filtering that we have to do as a society to deem what is sort of related to facts and what is opinions and what is just made up fantasy and made up lies. I don't know what that would look like, but there has to be some filter that we can agree upon as the people. I'm not saying in the institutional government. I'm saying some maybe third party and maybe different parties to be able to have some investigative fact-checking, neither the right or left wing politically aligned, but to fact-check what is factual, because there has to, it just, InfoWars is a lot of it, the conspiracy theories on, like, you mentioned Sandy Hook, attacking, and now Alex Jones even going after one of the Sandy Hook parents, suing one of the Sandy Hook parents. There has to be some limit. And I know that we disagree here, but I want to see what is your disagreement then, because what would it look like even in a socialist state when you have a isolated group of people deciding to create, made up stories about other people, and it could create a lot of division, and could potentially even be solely for its purpose, to create division and to create a different group that could potentially overthrow a socialist state. I'm just saying, like, if it was to be let's say in an idealistic socialist society, here in any society, I think there has to be some form of filter. I say filter, I'm still looking and articulating for the right word. I don't agree with censorship, but there has to be some sort of way for us to deem as a society collectively to say this isn't what we want, because it's only perpetuating more hate, more division, more just those basically.
First off, if we were going to use fake news as the decider of who gets shut down, and particularly fake news with a body count, fake news that leads to deaths, right? Deaths. Then CNN, NBC, all the mainstream media has to be shut down now, because the raison d'etre for going to war in Iraq was an entire fake news. The first Iraq war about Kuwait babies in Kuwait being thrown up in the air and put on the bayonets of Iraqi soldiers. Fake news, but that was used to go into Iraq the first time. Mm-hmm. The idea that we are not being spied on, the entire U.S. citizen ship was not being spied on. The only reason we know about it is Edward Snowden. Fake news for those people who said that is not going on. Okay? The people who said that we have to do something about Libya and Muammar Gaddafi when he was actually prepared to give up his nuclear weapons, fake news for all those institutions. So the first place you do, if you are concerned with fake news, the first institutions, so the ones first at the door that got to be shut down right now, is NBC, Fox, every New York Times, Wall Street, and guess what? That would actually leave most of the alternative out there, okay? So the starting point, the most dangerous fake news out there is mainstream media. You can't deny that. They have millions of deaths as a result of their fake news. Now, the authors of fake news actually was not Trump. The first people to talk about fake news was CNN after Trump was elected, because they were thinking they were going to be able to pin that on him because that's how he got elected. But it didn't work. Everyone started pinning it on them. The authors of fake news are them, particularly, so I'll just say that first. Second, we cannot, I do believe that regular people can decide what they're going to either debate, or if they are going to actually, in some cases, challenge each other in a more aggressive way over ideas. We can do that. All right, we can either have debates, in some cases when it's not just words, but it's actually people on the right trying to do deeds of hate. Then we actually have to challenge them, in a more physical way. Okay. So I'm thought we can do that. We can organize our side to the left to debate the other side. Okay. But when we put the power of deciding into our biggest enemies are not actually right now, the Nazis they're not the biggest problem right now. The biggest problem is the actual authority and the strengthening of the state that's happening, both to, in the case of things like whistleblowers, Obama helped support that. Trump's going to continue with that. But also now people are actually just justifying on the basis of, the YouTube is privately owned, so they get the right to decide who does that. Okay. That's, if you want to say that. Before you were saying that the internet is this whole new open world of discussions. I knew that was a lie because, like I said, we live under the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. And they get to say, because of ownership of property, who gets to say what they say, what they do. If they don't like what you do, you're out of a job. But is that our job to accept that? Is that his job as workers to accept their tyranny over us? Do we just want to give up now? So I say no. We do not put power into the hands of the biggest tyrants on the planet. It ain't Alex Jones. It's Facebook. It's Exxon. It's Google. Do you know what these people are doing with our data? They're giving it away to everyone. All right, and they are look. They have an entire plan on using our metadata to monitor us, using our metadata to control us, to decide what we get to see and what we. They already do that. They already give us filters to those things. By essentially sanctioning what they're doing with InfoWars, we're essentially saying, please kick us more. Because they're not kicking Alex Jones. Alex Jones is going to be fine. His website or his podcast, what did he do? He went to an alternative thing where people are downloading his app. It's the #1 downloaded app. I actually think they've helped him. I kind of think, there are some people who think that Alex Jones has controlled opposition, and I actually think there might be some case to that. But it doesn't matter. We're the fools who are actually letting him get away with it. The people who are going to get hurt the most are those of us who are the small independent voices. And by strengthening Facebook to do that, they're not smashing Alex Jones, they're smashing us. And we can't let them do it.
Yeah. I certainly agree that their MSNBC and CNN have lots of pundits on there that have flipped over the years, depending on the administration, and now are against right-wing administration, the Trump. But I mean, what? So what? So what is the alternative? I think that InfoWars and Alex Jones, I mean, they are sympathizers of war, MSNBC and CNN. My question would be then, so let us say we are in this idealistic socialist state. So you have here a side group that decides to foment, perpetuate division, and start talking about ridiculous, out of line, and just completely fake things just to incite people. What would that look like in a society where you would have a socialist state?
Look, first of all, I can't say right now like what a social society would look like or decide exactly what to do. I can say that workers know how to debate. We have debates, all right? We can do things like that. We can discuss ideas. But if we're talking about a society, like a social society controlled by workers, I actually believe we can figure out if the issue is one that can just be debated. There were big debates actually had in Russia over whether or not to give Germany the entire Ukraine. Okay, some people said don't do that because Germany's going to use that against us, take all our food from us. And Lenin was like, well, I'm sorry, but we said we were going to be at peace. We were going to give up on the war and not be a part of the war. And we were going to have to give up the Ukraine to do it. And he was willing to do so. Okay? So you can have those sorts of discussions, which actually led to essentially German occupation of an entire piece of land. That's what you do. You discuss it and debate it. Whether it's around racism and imperialism, I think that's what you would do. If it constitutes more aggressive actions, for me at least, I would say I would hope a socialist state and a socialist country led by workers. I actually think violence would be one of the last bastions we would use to resolve that sort of issue. I do think we would debate it out, and if people didn't agree, there's all sorts of things regular people could figure out to do. But that's not the world we're dealing with right now, and what I don't like is that you're going immediately to the socialist, but we're dealing right now with a capitalist world. With a like I said, we have a dictatorship in this very country, and its hand is getting strengthened. There is an urgency to stop this. We're talking about not people killed in Sandy Hook. We're talking, and Alex Jones didn't stop that or make that happen. We're talking about millions of people killed abroad and hundreds of thousands of people whose lives have been decimated because of a war, whether it's because they were sent to war and their families were destroyed, or whether because of the resources of this country have been used up to basically fight wars abroad instead of put money into institutions here. And don't even get me started on the fake news of healthcare, of Obamacare. That's entirely fake news that it was going to be. You can keep your doctor. Wrong, it was a lie. Everyone should be arrested for that if we want to make fake news an issue. Anybody who reported that should be thrown out. Okay? So I'm telling you, like, if your concern is fake news, then shut all these institutions, the mainstream institutions, down. And don't let Facebook and Google get away with lies. That's what they're doing. They're distracting you from that and calling everyone else fake news. And they're the fakest news of them all. And they have the authority to do something with it. That's the most damaging thing.
I agree. Here's where I feel sometimes our society currently, right, if we're talking currently then, is facing. I think that a lot of people are not in the know of what's happening because people are overwhelmed and inundated with lots of information out there, what to determine what is right and what's wrong. Like, there are things that people have prejudice and stereotypes about immigrants, and they search for things, and if you look for something, you'll find it to match your theory or idea of what you think is happening for immigrants with the highest crimes, or different sort of stereotypes or ideas that you have. You'll find something to match what you're looking for. And I think that is what our society is facing now during this time, and previous to this administration as well. I have debates with my friends, and some of them bring stuff to me that they have found that I thought, where did you find that? Because if you search for it, you'll find something. I think that's the biggest problem that we are facing now. I think you have a lot of faith in people in figuring things out.
Yes, that's true. Regular people, not the politicians, but regular people.
I think that you have a lot of faith, and I think it's the same thing with the gun issue, where you have a lot of faith in people sort of figuring things out. I'm more pessimistic. I do not think that people have they're not, especially with the lack of education, and in this society, in the USA, we're way below in many other major countries. People sort of watch TV, take that information with them, and do not fact check whether it's an opinion, whether it is something true. That happens with Fox News viewers a lot of the times. You have people talking about Hillary Clinton was a pedophile ring, something. There was a ring or something like that in a pizzeria or something like that.
Pizzagate.
Pizzagate conspiracy, and people really believed it. There was a percentage of people that believed it, and then there was a crime that happened. There was a person that was going to go with a gun. I mean, people really buy into this stuff. And I don't have a lot of faith in people to figure things out. And I'm not saying I have faith in the government to also have and filter things out for us. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, I think one of the solutions is for us to have collective education, to have to deliver to the masses to sort of figure things out. The internet, I thought, would be a great technology for all of that. But Facebook and other sites like Google, and now that Google is entering into a partnership with China, they are going to allow certain censorship to happen with this site in China. I think it's challenging to be able to rely on these sources, that search engines, and for Facebook. And China, everyone uses WeChat, something like that, I think, and everyone makes transactions on all that, and video chat and message and send. All kinds of bills are connected to that. It is all through one source. So I think people are relying on the specific sites of the internet that is narrowing them down to releasing personal information, and then they're then manipulated, like we had with Cambridge Analytica. And if we look at what happened with the 2016 elections, I have not seen any collusion between Russia and Donald Trump's campaign, but Russia did meddle with the elections in instigating propaganda. It happened in Ukraine. There are currently, and this is why I feel like I don't have trust in the people, I'll explain this, there are buildings and sites in Russia where people, and I can tag a link to this, people are hired to create stories and to falsify information and to deliver it as if they're in the Ukraine or as if they're in the USA. There were many protests that were formed, Donald Trump rallies that were formed from Russia, posing as US Americans. And what I'm saying is, this is how naive people are. They are just falling into the trap. I would say it's on both sides, left and right. But I'm saying is, there is this, I don't have faith in people the way that you do, to be able to decide and to critically think things through, to figure out what should be second guessed. Instead, people sort of buy into it. And that's my conflict, where I feel I'm not completely saying that InfoWars is the enemy here. I also think CNN and MSNBC are also another sources of fake news. But I certainly think that InfoWars has, how do I say this, an outright non-apologetic agenda promoting false conspiracies in a very alternative way that CNN and MSNBC does, because there are reporters on there that are separate from Alex Jones, controls and monopolizes the entire thing, whereas CNN, I'm not sure right now, I can say, but there are reporters that have lots of integrity, and those are individuals. But as an institution, I know that that's your criticism. What I just want to just say is just that I do feel that I do not know, I'm not saying I completely support that only one, specific kind of group with an agenda such as InfoWars be completely shut down. My conflict with internal conflict is, I don't have faith in people the way that you do, because people are easily persuaded. People are easily convinced to take a side.
Let me say, first off, I'm glad you're saying that, because I actually think that is the issue. That ultimately gets down to part of the issue, because you don't get to choose here, or you have to choose. At this point in time, and this is the way it is, you either choose you're with the people or you're with the state and the corporations. That's the way it is. There's no third party in this issue. So you have to make that decision yourself. If you want to choose not the people and that's fine. I'm going to give you a reason to choose the people in a second, okay? Because actually people are not the sheep that you think they are. And one of the reasons for 2016 and one of the reasons for the Russian meddling is the ruling class in the election of 2016 found out that people aren't sheep. Liberals, I wish they would have gotten the message that people aren't sheep, but they're not. On the right or the left, they're not sheep. They actually think about this stuff. So first off, why do I know that the people aren't sheep? The mainstream media had a candidate in 2016 that they wanted to win. That was Hillary Clinton. They wanted the Democrats. They propped up Trump because they thought they could beat him, and two things happened. One, on the left, a candidate rose. And no matter what they did, no matter what the mainstream media said, Bernie Sanders kept getting votes, even more than Bernie wanted in some case. They had to rig the election, the Democratic primary.
Caused upsets.
No, not just upsets. They had to rig the election because people weren't willing to be sheep, okay, on the left. They weren't willing to go with the program. Okay, no matter, they called him a woman hater, all that kind of stuff. Weren't willing to go with it. On the right, people, after Trump won the primary, which the mainstream media helped him win the primary, then they were going to go after him after that. The people on the right weren't going to go for it. Not because they're racist, because they hate the establishment and they thought he was the guy to take them down. And they weren't going to trust for a second the establishment. Liberals and the left has been saying forever, oh, people are so glued to their television. Well, guess what? It's not true. People actually are not able to be controlled. And that message terrifies the ruling class. And that's why you're hearing the Russian meddling. It's not because Russia meddled in the election. It's because the ruling class found out for the first time ever they could not control the narrative. They were not able to manufacture consent. They had to steal an election on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, the things got completely out of their hands. Now Trump's their guy. But the people behind him, they can't control, and they've been beating him, and yet he still stays up in the polls. I'm not saying that as a means of buoying Trump. I'm saying people are no longer willing to go for the okie doke anymore. And people are able to think independently. I'm saying what we all have said for a long time, which is, this is why we're creating a YouTube. We're putting more nonsense into look, we're building a YouTube channel. We're putting more nonsense out there. But the reason we're doing that is because we actually think there needs to be a plethora of ideas out there for people to choose from. Facebook's trying to narrow it all down for everyone. And if you get rid of all these plethora of ideas, you're not going to hear a plethora of corporate ideas. You get one idea, one capitalist idea, over and over and over again. Look at the media. Any AP article that comes out is the same thing over and over again, repeated as you go from channel to channel to channel. Okay? But there is something that the ruling class has accomplished right now. And this is what's so damaging. The ruling class has accomplished this situation where people on the left think they have to get behind the Democrats, and people on the right are getting behind Trump. So guess what you have a situation right now? It means both of us are trapped underneath two major capitalist parties. We're both circling that. That's all they care about. That's all they want. That's all they need. Once they know that we're under those two parties, it's game over. They got us. Then we are sheep at that point. So what Facebook is doing by going after InfoWars, even though InfoWars is a Trump shill, is they're trying to lay the basis for saying any radical ideas, anything outside of the mainstream, we get to clip off. We get to shoot down. And that's anybody who supports this is shooting that down. Last example, people should look into this around the Smith Act. And it's a very interesting lesson. The Smith Act was the government's use. This is not the private. The government's use in 1940 for saying we're about to fight a war against the fascists, and if you try to oppose the war, then you are a fascist. So Trotskyists who were like, no, we're not going to support your war because we think it's an imperialist war, and we're going to continue with our labor strikes during your war, those people were called allies of fascism and were thrown in jail. And guess who supported it? It wasn't just the capitalists. The Communist Party supported it. The left wing supported it because they were like, yeah, we're trying to build an alliance with Stalin and things like that. And they thought it was all good. All good. Okay, the Trotskyists are gone. 9 years later, the very same Smith Act was used to throw all the communists in jail. That's what's going to happen here, folks. The very same thing you're supporting right now to go get Alex Jones. Oh, good. He's done. He's not done. He's actually stronger now. What you're doing is strengthening the state that's going to get us, not him. And that's what you got to realize. So we can't afford to do this. We actually have to oppose it. And if you ever want a different world than Facebook deciding whatever gets done, private companies deciding whatever gets done, then you have to oppose every act they take to try to control people. I even control, for them, I don't trust them fighting Nazis. No, we fight the Nazis. All right? Now, I don't actually believe every single person that's a Trump supporter. In fact, only a small margin of the Trump supporters are Nazis in my mind. Okay? But if there's Nazis who are coming out and marching, yeah, I oppose that, and we may have to do battle in the street. But I don't want the state coming in with the police or the military or anything like that, because guess what they're going to do after they kick us to the side and kick them aside? If we ever get our act together, they're going to come in and do the same thing. Do you think we're not going to make trouble with our strikes? The whole notion of a different world is going to be based on making trouble to the ruling class. Big trouble. So, hold on. So the minute we do that, they're going to, the very same forces that we're supporting to go after InfoWars or to defend us from Nazis, they're going to come in and kick our butts too. We can't let them do that.
Now, I don't remember who said it, and I will look for it. And there is something, and maybe I might be paraphrasing, and maybe not doing a very good, not very good credit to this academic theorist about communication and the theory of hate speech and freedom of speech. There, I will post a link and more information for everyone in our audio listeners. I came across this article about if there is hate speech and we allow for, and we what does freedom of speech entail? Does it entail also allowing for hate speech to exist within the freedom of speech? At what point, if hate speech drowns out other forms of speech, can we say really that is freedom of speech? If one form of speech is, like I said, hate speech, drowns out other forms of speech, that is another form of oppression. And if we allow for hate speech to just allow it because for the sake of, well, we have to stand by the stand that all speech is freedom of speech, isn't that shutting down another way of shutting down the freedom of speech? Because the power and the charge of hate speech could then incite and get perpetuated to be able to also oppress others, which eliminates eventually the freedom of speech eventually if we allow hate speech to thrive.
Well, first off, we don't have freedom of speech in this country. We don't. Corporations can tell you what you can say and what you can't say, and they can fire you. We have an Espionage Act, which Obama used the most as any president, which said, if you try to do something which says you're going to take down this government or do something against us, we're going to throw you in jail. We don't have freedom of speech in this country. Okay? Secondly, the only source that I will trust to fight hate are workers, organized workers to fight hate. The reason I say that is because there is hate speech under capitalism. Capitalism is built on hate speech. Capitalism is built on building hate against the Philippines when we were going into that war, hate against the Mexicans when we were pushing them across their own border, hate against the Native Americans as we were pushing them out. And look, of course Trump is hate. I'm going to use examples with Democrats. Hate against black people when the Clintons were pushing hate against the super predator black people, and then they used institutions to throw millions of them in jail. Okay? Barack Obama used hate against Islamics to basically justify his drone wars. He's using hate speech, but he has more than hate speech. He has hate drones. He has a hate army. That's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about just people saying bad words. I'm worried about the stick they're going to hit us with that's going to back that hate.
Right.
Alex Jones' hate is small fry. It's nothing. He doesn't have an army to go push that stuff. I mean, of course, I don't support what he's saying.
A lot of followers.
Yeah, yes, but guess what? Guess where those followers started? They started as followers, not just the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party as well. The Democratic Party that built that border, which is a border of hate. Did Alex Jones build that border? He did not. Democratic Party built that border, and they had to justify it using fear and the tactics of divide and conquer and separate workers from workers. And they still do it. They still don't want. They talk about abolish ICE. They don't want a single immigrant coming across here, and they say we're gonna monitor. We're gonna watch them. We're not for open borders. F you. We are for open borders. That's it. The only non-hate position is open borders. Anything else is a hate position. Anything else, because anything else will be used that our hate police will or our hate La Migre or our hate army will be used to go institute hate against those people. That's the institutions of hate that we're worried about, the capitalist hate. So if you're worried about the capitalist hate, then you have to trust workers. The only thing that can take them down is workers. So you're stuck in a bind right now. You have to decide whether you trust that capitalist hate state or whether you think it's the hate of workers that's making that happen. I'm not in that bind. You are. Mm-hmm. And that's the situation every liberal faces right now, as far as I'm concerned, which is you're in a bind. Which side are you on?
Well, I don't trust the government, but I also I'm pessimistic and really do not have the hope for humanity is running low for me.
But the government and the corporations are acting. What are you going to do?
The corporations and
they're acting. They're taking steps right now. They're moving. They're doing stuff. What are you going to do? Stand there? Be like, I don't trust either of you.
I do not think that there is one or the other, Andy.
Yes, there is one or the other. It's happening. But no, it is. That is the reality.
Yeah.
Capitalism is not a standstill. Capitalism is dynamic. It moves all the time. So it's on the move right now. It's on the march. And they're building a war for us against each other. So I'm sorry. That is the situation. I understand the neutrality, the Sweden position people want to take. There's no Sweden under capitalism. Mm-hmm. Capitalism moves, capitalism acts, and we have to decide what we're going to do about it. And if we do nothing, then we're basically letting them do it. I'm not blaming us. They've taken a lot of power out of our hand. But I'm certainly not going to justify it for them, and I'm not going to use my own despair and my own sense of powerlessness to say they get the right to do it.
Well, I think that's why education comes in, and that's why we are doing this as well. I think that incites discussion so that people can be critically thinking about the media that they do listen to. We are not, here in this, for example, we are not trying to, even though we are on the left, we criticize the spect on that side of the left.
Yeah.
And I do think that there are voices that have to be within their circles or party circles or within their circle of politics to criticize each other so that they can try to critically think out issues. I personally am still conflictive about having lots of faith in people. I think that I see a lot of advertisements with psychological twists to try to make people buy things, eat certain foods, and it works. And this capitalist state is very good at persuading people to sway one way, and I just see people acting like a herd of cows, and everyone is following one way, and that's how they fall off a cliff if everyone just goes off one way. I have seen people just read something on the internet. I mean, you see it all the times. Doctors are having a hard time trying to talk their patients out of something they have read about a certain disease they have looked up online because they see it, and people are hypochondriac and they look it up and they see something that looks similar to what they have on their skin and they say, I have cancer. And doctors
I do that.
So it's like,
I do that.
I don't have faith in humanity, when they can look up something and self-diagnose themselves, or go and be persuaded by so many billboards and, like I said, advertisements of just psychological twists to try to make people hire psychologists, and people are swayed to that. And that is where I'm just giving examples of how I do not trust people 100% with guns and with some unfiltered. I'm not saying institutions like Facebook need to censor. I'm not saying that either, but I have not seen something, or we need to form something where there is some form of filtering, of fact checking, because people are inundated with information and the internet is vast, and you look at something and you'll find something that'll match what you theoretically think you have, or or your theoretical position that will match that information. There are countless articles. I remember listening to a podcast of this person in Alaska, and close some small town in Alaska. They were debating where they don't even have immigration issue, but they were debating an immigration issue. And there was this one civilian who was doing a civil duty of doing investigative research before he tried to decide his position on immigration, which they don't even have a high immigration issue in Alaska.
Caribou.
Yeah. But what he went to go do his research and everything about immigrants, and he found all this unintended right-wing propaganda about immigrants, and he was persuaded by the right-wing propaganda that he had read and all the fear-mongering that there is. And when, later on in the podcast, as he has interviewed, I'll post the interview. It's a really great podcast. It was on Radio Lab. He went through fact-checking with a reporter of all the facts about immigrants. And he said, you really have to be careful. He himself said this. You have to be really careful where you search, because you don't know where to begin. There's so much information. And that's how I feel most people are, Andy. Like, that is where I do not have faith like Andy has in people. I think most people are trying to go to work, trying to entertain themselves out of boredom and depression and substances, and trying to go to school, trying to make themselves a life. And people, I'm surprised sometimes I have a conversation with them and they don't even know who the vice president is, of this country, of this USA, and to even talk about certain issues like socialism. I have lots of people that I know that don't even know what socialism is. So, and that's why we had that video discussion where I said, you have to discuss this. What does this mean? And to you, how would you define it yourself? Because I think people are not entirely in the know. And that is where my lack of faith exists. And that is why I think that sites like InfoWars, and yes, left-wing, CNN, MSNBC, yes, I am sure that they're also on their political agenda persuading people. And yes, that's why people are liberals and pro-Hillary Clinton. And it's just very challenging. It's very commendable that you have faith. I do not have faith in people, but I also do not trust the capitalist state. You're saying it's one or the other. I don't know. I'm in this limbo where I'm not too sure how. I certainly am very paranoid with the government. I try not to use iMessenger on my phone. I try to use WhatsApp so everything's encrypted, all my messages. I'm also a little paranoid with the government. I don't keep my phone on all the time. I don't want to be recorded randomly by the government. I have paranoia around the government, but I also do not have faith around the people as well. And there is this thing I'm still trying to figure out, and if people want to know what my position is, it's still this figuring out how my position and my stance on it. I will say for InfoWars, I think people should decide. There should be some form that Facebook asks the people how they want InfoWars or something like that to be on their site, on their source. I do not think they should have the arbitrary decision making to have that. And like I said, I'm not missing out from InfoWars.
Well, let me say something that I don't think my faith in people is just an idea. Every pluralistic idea we have of women's rights, of the rights of people with disabilities, the rights of African Americans, those rights, none of those were granted by governments. None of those were granted by governments. They were all fought for by people, by movements that were generally opposed to governments. That's true of our country. It's true in the Spanish Revolution. Every time a movement of people starts, what it leads to, obviously when it's trying to fight for that progressive change, it leads to changing people's ideas. Now, it's tough because we live in a capitalist society, and Marx said the ruling ideas of any society are the ideas of that ruling class. So the dominant ideology we all face is capitalist ideology, and capitalist ideology is racist ideology, it's sexist ideology, it's homophobic ideology. All right, we have to fight to turn it that way. It's people that makes that happen. So my faith isn't just like coming from the sky. It's coming from actual history. If you look and you read what people have actually done, and the Russian Revolution is probably one of the best examples of not just sexual liberation of men who were gay or women who were gay, but sexual liberation of a new sort. Read Alexandra Kollantai. Read her writings that became popularized during the Russian Revolution. 1917, women being able to sexually liberate themselves. That wasn't talked about till 60 or 70 years later in this country. Again, though, that was talked about in the context of a movement. And if that movement makes a revolution...
Attributed to what, though? What would you say if people had questions? Like, how were they able to have those conversations?
Because there was a working class... Because it wasn't archaic. because
Well,
there were
not
Soviets.
like-
There were workers' councils in the fields, Soviet soldiers' councils, and workers' councils, and so these discussions were taking place because women were faced with these same issues, whether they worked or were at home. And so they were like, wait a second, we're going to have socialism, and I still have to just take it? No, it's not going to work that way. And if you're going to give me a voice, because they had to give women a voice, the opening salvo of the revolution that started in February that ended up leading to the Russian Revolution started by a movement of women, textile workers, I believe. That was led by women. So they were the detonator for that movement. So I have faith not out of some, people are great. Actually, people aren't always great. Capitalists are definitely not great. But workers have the potential to be great because we actually need each other. That's it. The only thing that makes us, we're humans just like capitalists. But capitalists don't need each other. All they need is profits. And and their dedication to profits, which they must have, that's the game, means they have to screw us and cheat us every second of our work. And it means they have to fight wars to see who gets the most profits and compete with each other. That's all they have to be dedicated to. That's not true for workers. Workers we don't have to care about profits. They try to get us to care about profits, but we don't have to. So we have to fight that. So I don't accept anything, like I will not, under capitalism, I will not accept any act that Facebook or Google says they're doing on my behalf, because I know it's a complete lie. Not a partial lie, a complete lie. The Russia meddling stuff is a lie because for the first time, the big story of 2016 is people actually didn't fall for the okie doke. People didn't fall for it. Weren't just sheep. They moved. They got out of the bin on the right, and they got out of the bin on the left. Well, guess what they've been able to do now? And Alex Jones has been part of this, actually. Alex Jones has been able to get all those libertarians and shove them right back in the Republican Party. That's pretty useful. And Bernie Sanders and Alexandra Kollantai, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has been able to get everyone onto the Democratic Party. There's no debate there. Which capitalist party do you like? Tastes great or less filling?
I'm not affiliated.
Well, I'm just saying they've got us in that situation. There's no debate then. There's nothing. It's like we're debating which exploiter we want. Yeah. So, and what this does, what these acts that Facebook have taken is basically everyone who's saying, "Oh, you're a private company, you get to do that." You're basically saying, "Here's the handcuffs. Please tie them up. Tie my hands up and arrest me now." Yeah. Because if we ever do get to, what do you think they're going to say when thousands of people are calling for open borders, which is what we need? What do you think they're going to say when they're saying, those crazy people are trying to eliminate the border? Those crazy people are trying to let MS-13 into this country. Mm-hmm. Those crazy people want to give the Native Americans their land back. Well, yes, that's what I want to do. I'm crazy like that. And the minute we try to do that, they're going to throw us in jail. Or say, you don't get the right to talk that way. Because that's going to take down our system. I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's exactly what I want to do. So why would we empower those people? Why would we give them the right to keep us from being crazy? Because it is crazy to think we can have a revolution. But yeah, why would we let them, it might seem that way, but why would we give them the right to censor us? And authorize it and sanction it under any instance? We shouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an ongoing topic. I think this is like part 2 of our previous media discussion. This
one gets me really my blood going. I don't understand it. Like, I know I've been such a jerk today, but it's just like this issue is like, I don't know why it makes me so, and it's not about InfoWars like you said, but we can't just stand by and let this kind of stuff happen.
Certainly, indubitably. All right.
All right.
Well, thank you, and that will conclude this discussion topic.
Yeah.
So, if there is anything that you would like to add to us, please comment on the comments below this YouTube video. Send us any criticisms or any debatable things you think that might have, since we're able to do it now, since we don't have a large following, so we are able to. And if you like this and anything that you hear from what's left, please share with everyone. And we are on 4 mediums: YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, and iTunes.
And now BitChute. BitChute is the non-censored YouTube.
Wow. Okay, so now on 5 mediums.
So,
wow. Handy.
I'm trying to offload onto these more freer things, you know. And I want to say thank you, Eduardo, for doing this on short notice, because I was responsible for sound and I kind of messed that up. And Eduardo's sick today. He's got allergies.
I have hay fever.
And he's done a great
I
job.
went up north.
And if you think I'm being tough on Eduardo today, you can double hate me because I was tough on Eduardo when he's sick and he was coming through today. So
it is all right. It's okay. I think actually when he says you to me, it's you to all of you.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So anyway, thank you, Eduardo, and thank you for joining us.
We will catch you all.
Yes, and we'll see you next week, hopefully with the stuff on Nicaragua.
Yes, hopefully we'll have with a Nicaragua interview. So check us out on that. Take care.
Take care.
Ciao.